Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank to the Father Abbot Melchizedek for the invitation me to take part in Putna colloquium and to visit such a nice place, Putna Monastery. Also, I'd like to thank to the Hierodeacon Father Abraham for the help with the studied material and for the very interesting communication. So now we start with the presentation. Thank you very much. The connection between the Moldavian and Ukrainian-Belarusian chant traditions of the 16th, 18th century seems very logical, given the territorial proximity of the Moldavian and Ukrainian lands and their belonging to a common Christian cultural space. This assumption is supported by the political, economic, and ecclesiastical contacts established between the neighboring peoples of the time. At the same time, it's not easy to show this connection at the level of chant repertoires. The comparative analysis of chants repertoires is complicated by the use of different musical notations. The famous manuscripts of the Putna musical school of the 16th century are written in Middle Byzantine notation. In the Ukrainian and Belarusian lands, znamena notation. In the Ukrainian and Belarusian lands, znamena semiography was used in the 16th century. Few manuscripts of this notation type have survived, and today it is impossible to decipher them reliably. The new Kiev staff notation emerged and gradually replaced the znamena semiography at the turn of the 16th, 17th century. Middle Byzantine notation was not used in the Ukrainian-Belarusian church chant tradition. The slide on the left shows a manuscript sheet from the mid-16th century written with znamena notation. There are three chants: Trisagion with the remark Holy God Greek, Святый Боже Греческий, Alleluia, and the beginning of cherubic song with the remark cherubic song Greek, cherubic Греческий, and with the intonation formula Neones. On the right, we see a sheet from the Suprash Irmoloion from the end of the 16th century written in Kiev notation. On this sheet, we see the famous Constantinople cherubic song with the remark Constantinople cherubic song of the third mode, translated into the Russian language from the Patriarch's Chante in 1583, September 8, very beautiful. The Ukrainian and Belarusian chant repertoire, the roots of which go back to the chant tradition of the Old Rus, is almost 100% anonymous. The names of composers are usually not indicated in musical manuscripts. In the 16th and 17th centuries, new chants appeared in Ukrainian and Belarusian manuscripts, and again, not with the names of composers, but with toponymic remarks indicating their foreign origin: Bulgarian, Greek, Serbian, Wallachian, Multanian, and so on. Quite often, the chants are named after the city or monastery: Kievan, Ostrog, Kiev-Pechersk, and others. Greek chant, which has been an object of our research for the last 10 years, appeared in the Ukrainian and Belarusian church musical manuscripts named Irmoloia in the 16th, 17th century and lasted in the liturgical repertoire until the end of the 18th century. The accompanying remark Greek, Grecki, Grecke, po-Grecku, as well as the Greek verbal text transcribed into Cyrillic alphabet evidence the Oriental origin of this chant. It is written not in Byzantine, but in a znamena and then Kiev square staff notation. Greek chants have not yet been catalogued and published. The information resource is the general catalogue of the Ukrainian and Belarusian staff notated Irmoloia of Yuri Yasenovsky, from which a scholar has to pick out the information about Greek chants. The Greek chants have not collected in the separate books. The manuscripts with the traditional Slavonic melodies, not all, about 10% only, contain the additional Greek chants. Most of these manuscripts have only 1, 2, sometimes 3 Greek compositions. Trisagion, cherubic hymn, and axion estin are the most common. If we pick up together the Greek chants scattered through the manuscripts, we will not get a complete liturgical cycle. However, there are few manuscripts with a dozen and more Greek chants. There are the chanting collections of monasteries in Suceava, Cuteino, Kyiv-Mezhigirski monastery, Lavriv, and Mănăstirea, Mare. Mănăstirea Ermoloia contains the richest collection of Greek chants. The question whether or not chants with the remark Greek from the Ukrainian and Belarusian Ermoloia are really Greek remained without answer because they are all anonymous. As a result of our comparative study, a significant number of them were attributed. Among them, there are colophonic works of prominent Byzantine composers of the 13th, 15th centuries. The attribution of the Greek chants shows that Ukrainian and Belarusian singers preferred the works of the early Byzantine composers rather than their contemporaries one. Ukrainian and Belarusian manuscripts of the late 16th, 17th century include the works of Byzantine composers of the 13th, 15th centuries. On the one hand, this proves their long-term popularity in the Greek East and in the territories under Byzantine religious and cultural influence. On the other hand, it is a marker of a certain liturgical and stylistic selection, since there are colophonic compositions which are the most difficult in the Byzantine repertoire. Further comparative study of the Greek, Byzantine, Moldavian, and Ukrainian and Belarusian manuscripts is very fruitful. The Moldavian chant tradition of the 16th century is based on the Byzantine one. To date, it is represented by 13 bilingual Greek Slavonic musical manuscripts written in Middle Byzantine notation. You can see this manuscript on the slide. The works of Byzantine composers make up most of the repertoire recorded in the Moldavian manuscripts of the 16th century. However, this majority is a rather limited part of the repertoire presented in Greek Byzantine manuscripts. So we can say that the Byzantine repertoire of Moldavian manuscripts was also formed as a result of a certain selection, liturgical and stylistic. In Moldavian manuscripts, as well as in the Ukrainian and Belarusian ones, colophonic works are widely represented. Moreover, the colophonic repertoire is common in Moldavian and Ukrainian Belarusian manuscripts. All attributed Greek chants from Ukrainian and Belarusian Ermoloia of the late 16th and 17th century, with the exception of Gazi's work, are also found in Moldavian manuscript of the 16th century. Undoubtedly, this fact allows us to talk about a direct and subsequent connection between the Moldavian and Ukrainian-Belarusian chant traditions. The following fact, which was established, proves exactly this. Cherubic song of the plagal first mode of Evstatie, the precenter of Putna, is recorded in Ukrainian and Belarusian manuscript. On this slide, we can see on the left the cherubic song of the first of the plagal of the first mode from Putna manuscript, and on the right we can see this cherubic exegesis of this cherubic written in Ukrainian in Supra's manuscript. Let's also remind that according to Elena Toncheva's research, the Maneva manuscripts contain Troparia Anastasima of the first mode of Evstatie, the Precente of Putna. Now let's return to the studied Greek repertoire. The frequency of records of the studied works in Moldavian manuscripts is not the same. Communion is Mimosion Aeonion of Manuel Chrysafis, and the cherubic song of the presanctified gifts liturgy Nina Dynamis of the monk Longin are almost all Moldavian manuscripts. And Sunday Communion Enite-Tongirion of Joachim Harsianitis and Manuel Chrysafis is recorded in only one of the 13 manuscripts. On the slide, the studied chants are placed in order of decreasing number of their fixation in Moldavian manuscripts. The next observation concerns the composer's attribution of the studied works. As we have already said, in the Ukrainian and Belarusian manuscripts, the composers are not indicated, only that they are Greek. In Moldavian manuscripts, composers are indicated, but not always. For instance, in half of the manuscripts, the communion chants of Manuel Chrysafis and Ioannis Klaudas became anonymous. And the name of Joachim Harsianitis is not indicated in Moldavian manuscript. Therefore, the established common repertoire testifies to the direct and subsequent connection between the Moldavian and Ukrainian-Belarusian church chant tradition. And now let's talk about what makes them different. In Moldavian manuscripts, Byzantine works are written down in Middle Byzantine notation, as we say, and in Ukrainian and Belarusian manuscripts in 5-line K1. Comparative study of the attributed Greek chants notated with Middle Byzantine new methods and Kiev staff notations shows that the Middle Byzantine notation was decoded by the 5-line K1. The deciphered works of Byzantine composers are their exegesis, their performance realization. So, the colophonic repertoire, which was cultivated in Moldavian monasteries in the 16th century, was recorded in the Ukrainian and Belarusian manuscripts as it sounded. Peculiarities in fixing the mode definition of chants are related to this. Attributed Greek chants from Ukrainian and Belarusian Ermoloia have the following features of their mode organization. The Byzantine notion ichos was replaced by the Slavonic notion glas. Mode definitions are often absent. For instance, this communion Enite-Tongirion in 5 Ukrainian manuscripts has no indication of mode. There are discrepancies in the mode definition of the same work in different copies. And for instance, we see this. We see that the cherubic song that was, which was attributed in the Ukrainian manuscript, Evstatie, the Precente of Putna, wrote it in the plagal of the first mode. And in Ukrainian manuscript, we know that it was written in second or in third mode. But it is the same work. And so indications of the mode offered in the Ukrainian and Belarusian manuscripts are often erroneous compared to the original definitions of the works ichos. The specified features lead to the assumption that the Byzantine modes were reinterpreted by Ukrainian singers and the sound of the Greek chants maybe was not stable. Differences in the mode definition of chants also occur in the Byzantine tradition, although not that often, but in the Moldavian manuscripts of the 16th century, we do not see any differences in the mode's definition of the studied works. Based on the Maneva manuscripts, Yelena Toncheva found out that a so-called everyday cherubic song of the seventh mode was written in the Putna manuscripts with the remark old, palyon, in the plagal of the second mode. According to the number of its copies, this cherubic song was the most popular in the Ukrainian and Belarusian lands, where it was called Greek or Bulgarian, and never it was called old. It is already written in the first staff-notated manuscripts of the late 16th, early 17th century. In the Lviv manuscript with the remark cherubic song of the Bulgarians, we can see it on slide. In the Doliniansky Ермолоен with the remark cherubic song Bulgarian, Cheruvim Bolgarsky, and in the Suprash Ермолоен with the title cherubic Greek, cherubic Grecki. In the manuscript of the Kyiv-Mezhyirsky monastery of the 1640s, it is stated that this cherubic song was sung daily. Cherubic Greek every day, cherubic Grecki повседневный. It was also sung daily in the seventh mode in the Manyava skit. Also, all previous copies, in all previous copies, the mode was not indicated. As we have already noted, this cherubic song was not called old in the Ukrainian and Belarusian lands. Also, such a remark is found in the Ukrainian manuscripts near the cherubic song of the fourth mode of Amphimos Lavriotis. In the manuscript of the Kyiv-Mezhyirsky monastery from the 1640s, this piece has the title Old Greek Cherubic Song. In the Byzantine tradition, there is also a cherubic song called Old. However, as our research has shown, it is not the one recorded in Ukrainian and Belarusian manuscript. And the old cherubic song, which is in Moldavian manuscripts and which later become Greek and Bulgarian in Ukrainian and Belarusian manuscript, is in a bilingual Greek Slavonic anthology of the 15th century, written by Isaiah the Serb, from the Mateicha monastery in North Macedonia. Let's also remind that Yelena Toncheva found an anonymous prototype of the so-called Bulgarian Theos Kyrios, Bogospot, of the fourth mode from Manyava manuscripts in the same anthology of Isaiah the Serb. She also showed that the melodic version of Isaiah the Serb himself is close to the version of Evstatie, the Precenter of Putna. This Serbian trace in the Moldavian and Ukrainian musical interrelationships prompted us to investigate whether the studied Greek repertoire is represented in this anthology of the late 15th century. It turned out that this famous Greek Slavonic manuscript contains most of the studied Greek chants, with the exception of the works of Platas, Harsianitis, and Hazis. So I believe that further comparative study of Greek, Byzantine, Moldavian, and Ukrainian Belarusian manuscripts will be very fruitful. Thank you very much.
Oh, dear Yevgeniya, congratulations for this fascinating presentation. I think that we found a golden thread here. Felicitări pentru prezentarea doamnei Yevgeniya. Cred că aici s-a găsit un fir de aur pentru repertoriul școlii muzicale de la Putna. Având în vedere că aceste manuscrise în notație chieveană au de-a face cu tradiție orală a vremii respective, de secol XVI, și ne pot ajuta extraordinar să mergem mai departe, și cred că și părintele Avram se va bucura enorm, pentru că așteptăm la anul cu toții aceste ediții anastatice și cred că această colaborare cu colegii noștri din țările slavone ne va ajuta enorm pentru a găsi ceea ce căutăm de fapt atât de mult. So, dear Yevgeniya, congratulations. I think that this will help enormously to decipher the chants of the Putna school, because this is exactly what we were looking for. We had the problem, what kind of exegesis should be applied to those chants, but this is very clear that it's a slow exegesis, as you showed us in your, and this is the clue. Este o cheie. Aici s-a găsit o cheie. Este o cheie că aceste cântări se cântau pe larg în secolul XVI. pentru că notația liniară ne arată și duratele. Deși nu este super analitică această notație, pentru că notația apuseană din aceeași vreme tot așa avea foarte multe posibilități de ornamentizare care se predau pe cale orală, ne arată totuși, cum să zic așa, schema metrică pe larg. Și de bună seamă, acolo se fac ornamente, că doar nu ții 8 timpi un ton fără să faci nimic pe el. Sunt tot felul de broderii și de ornamentări care se fac și care apoi sunt notate în detaliu în notația neobizantină, cu reforma celor 3 dascăli. Dar exact de asta aveam nevoie. Exact de asta avem nevoie și de aceea cred că este un punct foarte fericit în această colaborare. I'm really very, very happy because this was what we really needed to know from a historically informed performance practice, which is facilitated by this Kievan notation. So we are so grateful, and we will be your students in order to learn this notation very well. Spus doamne Yevgeniya, noi vom deveni studenții dumneavoastră ca să ne inițiați în tainele acestei notații chieviene și pormă o comparăm cu notația bizantină și cu tot ce se poate din lumea grecească. Dar cred că asta este o oră un ceas minunat, un astăzi pentru muzicologie, pentru școala muzicală de la Putna. Pentru că, într-adevăr, oricât încercam noi să argumentăm cu surse numai din partea grecească, mereu ne lipsea argumentul principal, cum era exegisirea în secolul XVI. Dar acum se vede, acești cântăreți au prins exact ipostaza melodică a cântărilor, nu erau interesați de a face transcrieri ale unei notații stenografice, ci de a se apropia de melosul care se auzea pe vremea respectivă. So this is wonderful because then we can go further to grasp the melodic flow of the oral tradition of Putna in the 16th century. So we are so grateful. Are there any questions? Hello also to Professor Simon Marincak. I'm very happy that you can be here, and also Professor Kyriakos Tsouramanis from Greece, which deals a lot also with themes of exegesis. So please, and Edward also, Mr. Tabak also, and whoever is in our dear audience. So please, if you have any questions, please you can address them to Yevgeniya.
So I prepared earlier a little welcome word for Yevgeniya here, Professor Yevgeniya, and I want to read it shortly, and after that to go to some points of interest from her article. So I'd like to thank also Professor Yevgeniya Ignatenko for her presence here. We know it was not an easy journey. I wish also to express my gratitude with this occasion for her special scientific contribution to the old Byzantine chants research regarding Putna School of Music, the discovery of the Kievan notation exegesis to old Byzantine chants in the 16th, 17th century. Kievan notation etymologians was an important help for Putna musicological research. As much as we know, all the Greek or Bulgarian chants identified by her until now could be found in Putna's old chants anthologians, except one, as said there. That means it was a close connection between the church singers and teachers from Putna and Ruthenian Orthodox space, a tradition which could be renewed in our days too. We hope. It was a little question regarding Joachim Carsianites. His name is present in Putna's Antologias. In the prototype of all the others anthology, all the others manuscripts, which is Putna 56, second part from 15th century, and also Synodal 1109 from Moscow. In that manuscript discovered by Professor Eliseva, from Moscow. Harsianite's name appears under name of Joachim, but because it was very the ink was almost disappeared there. She interpreted as Ioannes, and I asked her to check again to see if maybe it was because it was the same chant. She checked it and she confirmed that it was indeed Harsianites, Joachim Harsianites' work. But first of all, indeed, it was, I want to congratulate her for such an important discovery, Eustathius chant, Heroic song, which, as Professor Maria Alexandru said, could be beginning of a golden, what was the golden?
The golden thread, un fir de aur.
Okay. Yes, for Putna School of Music Research. And I'm very curious to see it. I didn't see it until now. I hope to have it as soon as possible. And to make it live, you know, to sing it a little, to see. Yes. Also, her work, as I already said, is extraordinarily important for Putna Music School, and maybe this could be the solution for credible exegesis of our chants from here. We hope this.